As we begin today, I want to call your attention to two important reminders. The first is that in 2 weeks, we're going to be done. Can you believe that? I mean, we're not at the finish line, but we can surely see it from here. We've got 2 more weeks to go. I hope to encourage you today to finish and be a part of our finale at the end where we have a graduation, enjoy that together. And along with that, at the end of your outline, I want you to notice that your 10 key moves that we've been talking about throughout the year, that next week, that 10 key moves sheet where you're writing down action points that you intend after men's fraternity is over to take you to a higher level of manhood and help you to win and continue to win at work and at home. That 10 key move sheet is due next week. So I want you to be sure to notice that at the end of your outline. Next week when we finish the session, you're going to be able to come and just deposit those outlines here on the stage. Just a couple of reminders that are in your outline. You need to have your name on it so we know that you've turned it in. So be sure to put your name on it. And if at all possible, please have it typed. That way I can actually read it, which I'd like to do. And that 10 key move sheet, as you guys know, is your requirement to graduate from this year's men's fraternity. So when we finish and have our grand finale, if you want to be a part of the graduation, you need to turn that in next week. Otherwise, you just get to watch the other guys graduate. So just some reminders, some heads up as we move towards the finish line. Now, if you look at your outline today, we want to talk about making a name for yourself at work. And I want to begin with a question. So what's in a name? That's a good question, isn't it? So what's in a name? Years ago, actress Sophie Tucker was kind of jokingly talking about the needs of a woman. And she said, you know, when you're in your teens and 20s, what you really need is good parents. When you're in your 20s and 30s, though, what you need are good looks. When you get in your 30s and 40s, you need a good personality. And after that, you just need cash. Lots of it. Last week we talked about what a man needs at work. And when he's in his 20s, what he just needs is to survive at work as he explores that new territory of making a living. And if he does that, that gives him energy, just making it out in the world. But you know, when he turns into his 30s, he needs to do more than just survive. During his 30s, he needs success. When he gets in his 40s and 50s, he doesn't need just success. He needs to begin to experience significance. He needs to know that his work really counts for something. And then as he moves into his late 50s, maybe even his 60s, as I talked about last week, he needs sustainability. He needs a work that he can enjoy doing whether he's employed or not. That was the big picture we looked at about what a man needs in this life cycle of work that we talked about last week. But I want to add one other thing to that today. Because whether you're in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, or 80s, there's something else that a man needs all through that time, even as he goes through those changing seasons. And that is what a man needs in all of those seasons is a name. He needs a name. And when I refer to a name, what I'm talking about is the reputation that begins to gather around that stone called you as it rolls through life. It's the reputation that you convey from how you conduct yourself at work, by how you interact with the people at work, how they think of you as you work, the kind of work you do, the attention it gets, the respect it commands, your name. Now, if you're a parent, if you're a dad here today, you know that when you had your first born child, you spent a lot of time trying to come up with a good name, didn't you? Went through the baby books, looking at all these different names, family names. You know, I don't know, there's almost like there's a hope that somehow if we come up with a really good name, we'll get a really good kid. We wish that would happen. If that were so, I'd introduce you to my son, Michael Jordan Lewis. The truth of the matter is, though, a good name is not given. A good name is made. And it's made primarily at work. If you saw the classic movie years ago, To Kill a Mockingbird, you know that that movie is primarily about race and prejudice in the Old South. That's really the theme of the movie. But if you watch it closely, it also conveys a powerful message about making a name for yourself at work. Gregory Peck plays this small-town attorney named Atticus Finch, who is defending an innocent black man by the name of Tom Robinson, who's been accused of raping a girl in this town. And it's a big story, and the whole town turns out for the trial. The whites are in the floor level of the courtroom. The blacks are in the balcony, watching whether justice is going to be done. And everybody has their idea of what justice is. And in the process of Atticus defending this black man, Tom Robinson, you can literally, as you watch the film, you can literally feel Atticus's Finch name grow. All through the film, you begin to admire this man, not just as an attorney, but as a special kind of attorney who courageously stands for truth against the fear and rage of blind bigotry, who conducts himself with dignity even when it angers his friends and they ridicule and mock him, who works these incredibly long hours so he can prove to the whole town what is fair and what is just. And the sad ending of that movie is that though he does all of that, he loses this trial. But you know he's gained a good name. And you see it in one of the final scenes. After Tom is convicted, the courtroom empties except for the blacks in the balcony. And Atticus is putting his stuff in his briefcase, and dejectedly he slowly starts walking down the aisle out the courthouse. But as he does, in the balcony, all the different black men and women who have been long oppressed by racism and prejudice, they begin to stand in his honor. Slowly, one by one, they stand up. One of those blacks taps Atticus's daughter, who had been up in the balcony with them, and he says to her, Miss Jean Louise, stand up. Urgently, he says, stand up. Your father's passing. That's what I mean by name. An honorable name that's gained through honorable work. What's attached to your name at work? It's a good question, isn't it? Hopefully it's this: a growing and good reputation, which, by the way, guys, I have found becomes more and more important to men as they go through life. I'm just old enough to begin to recognize that. You know, when you're young, it's just getting it done, achieving. You got your warrior face on. Then in your 30s and 40s, it's kind of gathering stuff. But you know, after a while, when you get to be my age, guys have done all that. And what remains is the most important thing, and it's the way guys connect in their 50s and 60s. It's around their name and whether they have a good name or not. It's important. That's why Solomon, in all his wisdom, could make the following statement in Proverbs 22:1. Look at it there. Just absorb it. There's unbelievable wisdom here, guys. A good name, Solomon writes, is to be more desired than great riches. All through life, no matter what you're doing, in your 20s, 40s, 60s, or 80s, if you look in this mirror called work, and you stare in it long enough, not just with what you're doing, but what you're feeling about who you're becoming. If you're becoming someone who's honorable, what will be reflected back in that mirror will be life. And the longer and bigger that name becomes for you personally, the more life that it gives. Good name is to be desired above great riches at work. So how do you do that? How do you build a name for yourself at work? Well, I'm going to offer you 5, what I call on your outlines, 5 proven practices for establishing your name at work. And for you young guys here just embarking out into a career, maybe you're 5, 10 years into it, I think this will give you a jump start on where you really need to keep your focus, what your North Star is. You practice these principles, and I guarantee you, you'll have a good name at the end. Here's the first one. Don't just work. Work to be really good at something. Listen to the wisdom of Proverbs 22:29. It says, do you see a man skilled in his work? Underline the word skilled. Do you see a man skilled in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men. Now, the point of that proverb is this. A guy who really works at it and is good at it will always stand out. He doesn't just go through the motions. He becomes something in his work. To help pay for graduate school, I remember years ago my brother John took a construction job. Now, he wasn't in construction, but he needed a job to help pay through his way through graduate school, so he did. But John has always gone about mastering things he's done. My brother's kind of a jack of all trades type. So he was doing this construction job, and he noticed this guy putting in this decorative tile and ceramics in these bathrooms and stuff like that as he was going through his job of just picking up lumber and cleaning up stuff. And in typical John fashion, he asked the guy, how do you do that? And the guy said, you really want to know? And so while John was on the job, he just began to learn how this guy decorated these bathrooms and these kitchens and these entranceways. And as he told me later, he said, first I just stayed around a little afterwards and worked hard at it. And then after a while, I became good at it. About midway through graduate school, I was being known for it. And high-end, he said, builders from all over the state of Colorado began to seek him out to ask him if he would work for them to work in these bathrooms and these kitchens and these entranceways, laying down this tile that he could do so well. They still do, even though he's a seminary professor. He still kind of travels around the state doing high-end jobs, making really more money than he makes teaching in a classroom. Because around his name has gathered another descriptive phrase. Master craftsman is what he's known for. Business consultant Bob Beal has observed that there are 2 ways men make a name for themselves at work. One way is being promoted up. You do a good job, guys recognize it, they move you up the chain of commands, you get more authority and more recognition as you go. But the other way is being sought out. Not moving up necessarily, but being sought out because you've learned to do what you do as good or better than anyone else. You just didn't put in time. You became really good. Think of any work here in this room today, guys. Furniture refinisher, maybe you're a photographer, a dentist, an auto mechanic, maybe you're a hunting guide, a home builder, a tax attorney. Here's what I want you to know. As I mentioned, each one of those trades, somewhere out there, as I mentioned those trades, stands the man. The guy that does it better than anyone else. Because he chose to. He mastered it. He's known for his professionalism. He's known for his excellence. He's known as the best. And the only thing that keeps any man in this room from being the best is a decision to be really good at what you do. So here's my question. Since we're all going to have to go to work today, okay? Bell's going to ring and off we'll go. Why not be really good at what you do today? Why not give it just a little extra effort so that around the office and before those who interact with you, you'll be known as just a cut above the rest. And in the process, you'll begin to make a name for yourself. Here's the second way. Be responsive to those above you and earn their trust. For you young guys, I think this is particularly important. Because today we have a kind of an attitude that it's for me. Guys, it's not for you. It's for those you work for. Do you know what is an employer's dream when he hires guys? His dream is that he would find an employee. Listen carefully. His dream is that he would find an employee who would faithfully seek to accurately execute the plan exactly as given. That's an employer's dream. That I could tell you what to do. You'd really listen, you'd really understand, you'd really get it, and then you would go out and faithfully execute it just as you received it. That's priceless in the mind of management. You can take this statement to the bank. That kind of responsiveness always catches the eye of those who lead you. It makes an employee say to his management team, now there's a guy we can trust. There's a guy who is a real team player. There's a guy who, for whatever reason, understands and appreciates authority rather than chafes under it. There's a guy who's teachable. There's a guy who will follow through. There's a guy we can trust other things to. And over time, that's exactly what they do. They begin to entrust more things to a person who's faithful and who's safe. And they begin to even listen to what that person wants to say about the direction this company's going. Because responsiveness not only gets you a hearing, in time responsiveness gets you a name and a promotion. On the other hand, few things are more exhausting to an employer or a manager than an employee who grudgingly goes about his work, who's constantly questioning under his breath what he's being asked to do, even if it's unreasonable. That's why you were hired. That's why they pay you. Who skips or changes important details because for some reason in his youthfulness, he thinks he really has a better way. And maybe he does, but he doesn't have a hearing. He doesn't have a name yet to be heard. You earn that. Who's always has an excuse for why he didn't follow through. I like the imagery of Proverbs 25:13. And for those of us who have led men, you can almost stop here and just take the rest of the day off because it feels so good even to read it. A faithful employee is as invigorating as a cool day in the hot summertime. He refreshes the soul of his boss. You guys who lead men, do you feel that? That you could tell a guy today at work, hey, I need you to do this, and just in saying it, you're refreshed because you know it will get done faithfully. Listen, faithfully responding to those over you is a way to earn a name, and it's the way to move up. Here's a third way. Over-deliver. Proverbs 10:4 says this, poor is he who works with lazy hands, but hard-working hands get rich. There are clearly two kinds of work standards on the job. And guys, look at me for just a second. There are two kinds of work standards. You see it everywhere. This is not rocket science. This is just observing life. And every one of us in the room operates by one or the other of these two acceptable work standards. Now, the third work standard is not to work well, but I'm talking about two acceptable levels of work. Here's what I would call them. The first is called good enough. Just good enough. And that's what it is. It's good enough. It's where you do what's expected. You get the job done, but you just reach that level of just getting it done, and now it's good enough, so you let it go. But the second is much more aggressive. It's the one that burns at a higher rate of energy and enthusiasm. and it's called over-delivering, because that's what it does. It's peppered with extra things that go over and above the expected call of duty. Over-delivering is a chosen mindset at work. It's bringing what young people call your A game to work with you. It's a mindset that enjoys better and more, and hearing the words of others around you. Just takes delight in hearing these words after you've done a job. That's outstanding. And you go into it with that mindset that when you're done, when you're finished, when the job's over, those around you are going to stand back and go, man, that was really good. And you can feel that energy that you've given them by over-delivering. And over-delivering only takes a few small extras, but it builds a great, great name. It's a creative spirit that loves to surprise, loves to encourage, and most of all, loves to impress. Whether it be staying an hour late to make sure the job is done extra well, whether it's consistently beating deadlines, whether it's being under budget in your expense account, just because you enjoy seeing your employer smile, going, whoa, knowing everybody else is padding theirs. But you delight in impressing. Whether it's doing those extras in the presentation, those few little extras that make it more than good, whether it's surprising the customer that you did the brake job for, and he came to pick up his car, and rather than those dirty mats still being in there and the tags laying over the front seat, he comes to pick up a car and you've done the brake job, but you washed his car too. And you surprised him. It's giving out bonuses that you didn't have to. It's following up to make sure the repairs were done right. And if they weren't done right, or even if they were, but the customer didn't smile, you stay and do something else so that they will. It's being at a meeting early and saying, what can I do to help? It's writing handwritten thank you notes and follow-ups of encouragement that the customer never expected. And on it goes. It's called extras. Because one of the ways you make a name for yourself at work is to make it your rule, your way of life, to over-deliver. And you do it long enough, even though it kind of grates on you a little bit, until it becomes you. And when it becomes you, your name grows with it. Here's a fourth proven practice. Be an encourager, a team builder. 1 Thessalonians 5:11, Paul says just that. He says, encourage one another and build up one another. Just, at least in this day, those people were doing. And of course, of particular importance when you talk about encouragement and team building is how you use your mouth at work. You know, that tongue, James says, can be an instrument that creates great goodwill, or it can be an instrument of destruction. Because we all know it can unite or it can divide. It can build up or it can tear down. It can problem solve or it can whine. It can create a host of good things or a host of bad things. Here's what Ephesians 4:29 says the good worker does, though. It says, let no unwholesome word proceed from your mouth, but only such a word as is good for the building up of one another according to the need of the moment. So it'll give grace to those who hear. Let me tell you, when you walk by a group of employees or even customers, after you walk by, how do they talk about you? Because when they talk about you, they're talking about your name. Your name is a summary of everything that you are. And as you pass by, do they turn to one another and say, man, he's really a good guy? Or he said that to me that so encouraged me. Or you know what he did? He showed up 30 minutes early the other day and helped me set up for my presentation. It's being a uniter, not a divider. And it's hard because this little instrument in our mouth, called the tongue, is hard to control. But the Scripture says, if you are an encourager, you're going places because you'll have a good name. Then the fifth proven practice is this: keep your word. Jesus said it this way, very succinctly. He said, let your yes be yes and let your no be no, period. You don't need to add much to that. If you have to add stuff to that, then it's saying you haven't come through. You haven't followed up on your word. Now you're making excuses. When you say you'll be there, then be there. Not only be there, but be there on time. When you say you'll pay, pay it. When you say, I'm committed to something, follow through. And when you say it'll be done, make sure it's done on time. Your word and your name travel together. Your name is sitting in the co-pilot seat next to you, the pilot, and your name. They travel together. The Scripture commends the man who makes promises that later turn into circumstances that are really hard to follow through on, and yet he goes ahead and does it even when it hurts. I thought that was interesting that when it's talking about the ideal man, it says oftentimes he'll make a promise that's hard for him to follow through on, yet he does it anyway. The psalmist says it this way in Psalm 15:4, he swears to his own hurt, yet he does not change. You've done that. You said, yeah, I can do that for you, and then circumstances come where, gosh, it's hard to do that. And you go, why did I say that? And yet you follow through anyway. You know, years ago, God taught me how He honors keeping your word. My wife and I had just moved to Oregon, where I was going to seminary at the time, and we had saved some money to make that transition and gotten into Oregon that summer and started school, and the little nest egg that I'd saved up started running dry. We didn't know anybody there in Portland. We tried to get jobs, but at the time it was very difficult to get a job, and so we were struggling. And I remember we got down to our last $65. And I was hoarding that $65. And then one evening, I went out to get my little dog in the backyard, and the dog was sitting there shaking violently. And I knew something was really wrong. And I discovered later the dog had been poisoned. But I didn't know anyone. I got the phone book. I started going through looking up veterinarians, and it was at night, and I started calling these numbers. Nobody would answer. Finally, I got down to one that said he had an emergency number, and I called him. And he answered. I said, something's wrong with my dog. I was just panicking, you know. It's the only little friend I had in Oregon. I said, can you help me? And he said, yeah, I'll meet you out at my clinic. Come right now. So I jumped in the car, my wife and I, we sped out there, handed him the dog. He said, now this is going to cost. And I said, whatever you need to do, just help my dog. He said, okay, call me in the morning. So the next morning I called him. I said, how's my dog? He said, he's dead. And then his next words were, that'll be $60. I went, $60 for a dead dog? Now here's the question. Listen, I can't laugh. I love that dog. But here's the question. I'm 15 miles away from that veterinarian. I've never met him except late at night. What would you do? I remember I got in my car and I drove out there with my wife. Sad as we could be that we lost our dog. Walked in and counted out $60 to this guy. And he looked at me after I gave him the money. He said, I can't believe it. I said, what do you mean? He said, I can't believe you came to pay me. Nobody would do that. What do you do? I said, I don't do anything. So that's the problem. My wife and I are looking for jobs. And he said, you're looking for jobs? What does your wife do? And I said, well, she's looking for a receptionist job or something, teaching job later in the fall. He said, I need an assistant. And he hired her in 10 minutes. He said, because you're somebody I can trust. That was a great lesson in how God honors His word. So here are the 5 proven practices. Don't just work, be really good at something. Be responsive to those above you, over-deliver, be an encourager and a team builder, and guys, always keep your word. Now, you young guys especially, look at me. If you want to check those with the older men around you and see if those things aren't true, and when we break up into small groups, just ask the guys, does that stuff really work? And is your name that important? You'll be hard-pressed to find a guy in the room that won't look at these and go, yeah, that's the way life works out there. In fact, I've got a few more I'd like to add to the list. Now, with that, I want to add two other things, what I call two crucial commitments that you're going to need to make in advance to protect your name. Here's the first one. Never lie or cheat. Proverbs 10:9 puts it this way, he who walks in integrity walks securely. He doesn't have any fear. Doesn't have any reason to fear. But then it says, but he who perverts his way, and we could just add a parenthesis, at work, will be found out. Don't believe me, just ask Ken Lay at Enron. Or ask Patrick O'Brien. He would be a good witness to call to the stand at this point. You know, Patrick O'Brien at the end of the 20th century was considered one of the greatest writers in that day. He was relatively unknown until a reviewer called his multi-volume series on the British Navy the greatest historical novels ever written. And then suddenly this Irishman, Patrick O'Brien, at age 76, became world famous. He immediately sold over 3 million books. It was translated into 20 languages, and the public clamored to know who this incredibly gifted writer was. And so a British journalist took it on to do a feature story on Patrick O'Brien. He got a personal interview with the man many considered one of the greatest writers of the 20th century. And as he interacted in this interview with Patrick O'Brien, there were some disturbing inconsistencies that he began to pick up. And after he left the interview, he began to do his own personal investigation. And here's what he found. This 76-year-old famous Irish author wasn't Irish at all. He was born in London, England. And his name wasn't Patrick O'Brien. It was Patrick Rush. And he had never studied at Oxford like he claimed. And though he had written this multi-volume series on the Navy, claiming he had had experience at sea, he had never set sail ever onto the sea. But in fact, he had spent some of his life with the British intelligence, where he became a master at deception. And he wasn't childless like he claimed either. In fact, he had abandoned his wife and his son when he was 25 years old and disappeared into the British intelligence with the desire to hide himself away and then reinvent himself later. And you know what? He almost did it until 1998, just 2 years before his death, when Patrick Russ was found out. Found not to be just a great writer. He was found out, just like the proverb says, to be a great liar. And it's put a gigantic stain on his name. Guys, if you want to win at work, and if you want to make it at work, then you have to be honest. If you want to ruin your name at work, then believe, like so many others, that you can lie or cheat and get away with it. But you'll never get away with it. You can mark it down. You'll always pay a price for deception. If not humiliating exposure, then you will live in the constant fear of it. And both equal death, not life. According to the Washington Post survey, here are the 4 most common lies at work. Lying to get a job. Did you know today it's estimated that 40% of all resumes contain lies on them? We've watched coaches lose jobs because they've said they had a master's degree that they didn't have, and so on and so forth. Exaggerating and falsehood, my resume. Secondly, lying to make money. Can you say WorldCom? Maybe it's just a sign of our times, but in 2003, Time Magazine's Persons of the Year, the most influential person on the planet, you know who their Persons of the Year were in 2003? Whistleblowers, 3 whistleblowers who went on to expose corporate corruption that was rampant in America. Third is lying to advance one's career. And fourth is lying when called on the carpet. If you want to make a name for yourself, and this is very important, then you have to decide now, not later, not in the heat of battle, to always say no to deception. Here's what Proverbs 22:3 says. A wise man foresees the evil ahead, and he prepares for it. He decides now what his standards are going to be, what his beliefs and values are, that he's not going to change. And that's how he goes into the battle of life at work. But the simpleton goes blindly on. He hadn't thought it through, and he suffers the consequences. Guys, in the moment is not the time to think about how I'm going to respond to a bribe or to lying or to cheating to get ahead. You got to put the stake in the ground right now. It's a good action point for your 10 key moves. And you need to decide now that you're committed to God, to trust Him, to trust God for the outcome when you're asked to lie or you're pressured to cheat. Charles Ocott made that commitment. In 1998, he told Doug Sherman, who goes to this church, that he was committing himself to lead his company with integrity. And he led a pretty big company. He was the CEO of Burger King, which in 1988 was $6.6 billion in company revenues. Burger King was also part of a bigger conglomerate called Pillsbury. And in 1998, Pillsbury received an offer from a London-based company called Grand Metropolitan to purchase Pillsbury at $66 a share, which was amazing because at the time it was trading for $34 a share. So it was an incredibly generous offer, and it was a windfall for the stockholders at Pillsbury. The chairman of the board of Pillsbury called in Charles Ocott and said, I need your help while these negotiations were going on. He said to Olcott, this is a great opportunity for us, and we can make even more. And you know more about the figures than anybody else. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to demonstrate tomorrow at the meeting that we're going to have that the value of our stock is actually undervalued. That's really not $34 a share, that's a steal, that it's really more like $60 a share. Because if we can demonstrate that, then I can negotiate an even higher sell price with Grand Metropolitan. Olcott responded and said to the chairman, I got to be honest with you, $34 a share is actually overvalued for our company. And the chairman at Pillsbury said, I need it at $60. Do it. So what would you do? Here was Olcott, about to make millions with his golden parachute. And all he had to do was fudge some numbers. But Olcott had already decided. He didn't have to decide in that moment. He had decided months before what to do. And so he said, no, I refuse to cook the books. And he was released on the spot, fired. He lost most everything except one thing. And what was that, guys? His name, his good name, which he went on with and which has served him so well since. It has, in fact, served him much better than this sweet deal would have ever delivered on. Guys, for a good name, you must never lie or cheat, and you have to decide now. A second crucial commitment you need to make is avoid immorality at all cost. 1 Corinthians 6:18 says it very simply. It just says, flee immorality. That means run. That's what it means. I know we live in a tough age for this. And it's going to be hard on a lot of guys here to hear this, but here's what I want you to know. When it comes to the job, immorality is vocational self-destruction. Because nothing flips a man's career upside down quicker than an illicit affair. Here's what Proverbs 6:32 says. The one who commits adultery with a woman is lacking sense. He who would destroy himself does it. Worse, this affair, whatever it might be and however it came about, it leaves a long-term stain on your name, unlike anything else. Do you think Kobe Bryant believes that now? Do you think Bill Clinton believes that now? I'm not saying whether it's fair or not that sex is listed up as a higher sin than anything else. I don't think that it is. It's not whether we want it to be down equal with everything else because we think that's fair. That's not really what happens in the public square. Immorality, look at me guys, immorality at the workplace marks you for life. It leaves a long-term stain on your name. Proverbs says that. Chapter 6, verse 33, it says, wounds and disgrace an immoral man will find, and his reproach, unfortunately, will not be blotted out. Now, some of you guys are sitting here saying, well, yeah, that's tough. I've seen that happen. That's not me. I'm happily married. I'm doing well. It's not a temptation for me. Things are good. Whoa. Let me warn you. Look at the next thing. Watch out for the black widow. She's out there. And sooner or later, every guy in this room is going to cross her path. Here's what Proverbs 7 says in describing her. Just follow along as I read the words. And behold, a woman comes to meet him dressed as a harlot and cunning of heart. She is boisterous and rebellious. Her feet do not remain at home. She is now in the streets, now in the squares, and lurks by every corner. In other words, she's everywhere. I have come out to meet you, she says, to seek your presence earnestly, and I have found you. She flatters him with those words. With many persuasions, she entices him. With flattering lips, she seduces him. And then it says, and I'd almost want to have it in huge letters, blinking like a neon sign. Without thinking, without any forethought, without any preparation beforehand, suddenly the chemistry takes over. And he follows her as an ox to the slaughter until an arrow pierces through his liver, as a bird hastens to the snare. So he does not know that in this moment, what he's about to do will cost him his life and his career. Even if he continues to succeed, he carries a stain on his name. I hope this doesn't surprise you guys, but I've met this woman on a number of occasions. I remember when I was a young pastor, a young lady came in a troubled marriage to talk to me and ask me for counsel. I remember we were sitting there together in my office, and she was pouring out her heart, telling me the trouble she was having and how her husband wasn't meeting her needs. And suddenly, just almost seamless, the conversation moved into her talking about her frustrated sex life and what she was missing, and then what she liked and what she needed and wasn't getting. And suddenly her eyes met mine. It was the eyes of a black widow. And in that look, I still see that look. And in that look, I wasn't counseling anymore. And I wasn't in counseling at the time. I was being propositioned. And right there, your life hangs in the balance. And I had the good sense in that moment to walk out, but I want to be honest. When I walked out with cobwebs all over me. You know what I mean? Everybody hear me? I had cobwebs all over me because that's the pull of a black widow. It's powerful. That's why you must decide now, right now, not later, what you're going to do. And here's some suggestions for protecting your name. These are just some practical ones for your work today. Never travel with a woman alone. I know your company will sometimes want to send you and do that, but I would insist, never travel with a woman alone. Always have a see-through office at work. Don't have a door that people can't see through. Avoid innocent flirting as a married man. I know some guys say, just kidding around. No, there is no such thing as innocent flirting. Proverbs 6:25 and 27 says this. It says, do not desire her. It's talking about somebody who's not your wife. Her beauty in your heart, nor let her catch you with her eyelids. Then it asks the question, can a man take fire in his bosom and his clothes not be burned? And there are 1,000 married men out there walking the streets today who've fallen, who will answer, no, you can't take fire there with even a little flirting. Because when you do and it catches fire, you're swept away. You lack all sense in that moment. And of course, the last one is have a partner at work watching out for you. Because there are going to be times we're just going to be walking into dead-end alleys, blindly going our way, not clued in, and a guy can pull us over to the side and say, hey, you need to back off there. So it's good to have an accountability partner. Okay, guys, let me just close this way. I want to give you 5 benefits. I'm just going to list them that go with a good name. 5 long-term benefits I believe you will have if you're now in the last season of your life. Now you're looking back and you got a good name. You've had a good track record. You've done the things we've talked about. You've lived with wisdom, not because you had it. Nobody's wise. But because you looked at it and you invited wisdom in to be a part of your life. If you did that, and now we're at the last season, you're looking back, what are the benefits of a good name? Here they are. First, people admire you as a man. And I've told you all along through men's fraternity, what men want most in life is to be admired for their performance. Secondly, you will have influence, or you will influence others in a positive way. You will be known as a person who takes people up. You help them get better. Third, young men will seek you out. They'll seek you out for advice, and you'll have some good advice for them in that last season of life that they can benefit by as well. They'll look to you for mentoring. Fourth, God will be honored by your life, and you'll feel His pleasure. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, the pure of heart will see God. That's what Jesus promised. I'll also add, not only seeing, feeling. Because when you've done the right thing, when I walked out of the room from the black spider, the black widow spider, it was hard. But when I got out the door, I felt the pleasure of God. And then lastly, you will feel a deep satisfaction about your work because you were smart enough to listen to wisdom, and wisdom rewarded you with life. So what's in a name? What's in a name? And I would answer, for a man, everything.